grief. Emotions that can be hard to handle. So we tend to put up walls. We call it coping. It's only natural.
Hey man, we don't need you, right? Get out of here, we don't need him.
You know, we've all become so close because...
But where does coping end and our responsibility to our patients begin?
This particular case, my stepdad, they had the same illness.
Okay.
And looked quite a lot alike.
Okay.
You know, and one night I just got up real close. I was washing his face, and I just burst out in tears. I had to walk out of the room, you know.
Because
he reminded me so much of my stepdad, who died of the same thing.
Oh, Lordy.
So there's that closeness, you know, and then when he had gone to rehab and then now he's back, you know, a few days later,
It hurts.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. You're part of the family.
And you can feel what the family's feeling too, you know.
Makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it? Yeah. Does it bother you that you would burst out into tears when...
Well, it bothers me because I don't want to upset the patient, you know.
You don't feel it's unprofessional?
Well, you know, there's a difference between being, you know, professional and holding back emotions and being human.
First patient is a 36-year-old male. He was thrown from the car. We found him in respiratory distress with agonal respiration. We've taken ceasefire precautions. We have him intubated. He had a blood pressure of 90/70.
There is a secondary traumatic stress syndrome that is observed in ourselves. We're usually vulnerable to it when we work on a case that reminds us of something from our own life or our own child or our spouse. So all of that professional distance that we've achieved through medical or nursing education doesn't mean a thing when you're operating on someone and it could be your own 6-year-old.
Christopher bothered me a lot. He was in a diving accident and he was a quad too. And it was, he had a little brother and he was only 13.
I guess he'd, you know, really been a good kid, a kind of kid with a paper route and done everything right, and somebody just came up to the car and shot him in the head, some other kid.
We came in that morning and he was just as pale as a ghost, and they said it's just a matter of time.
You know, he wasn't going to make it, and to hear his sisters screaming and, you know, the mother just kind of sitting there in a daze.
How unfair for a 13-year-old boy to die.
There's nothing that can be said. All you can do is just be there with them through it. And sometimes after, that's when I find myself crying on the way home.
We all have stories like these. Stories that have affected us. Stories that we carry with us. It helps to share these emotions. To work them out, especially with our co-workers, people who'll understand, who've been through it too. Dealing with our feelings, confronting them. It helps us to get on with our work, helps us move on to that next patient and their loved ones.
There are times when you have to try to hold the tears back. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I've watched nurses really be right there for that family. But it takes maturity. It takes practice. It takes feeling okay about yourself, that this is all right for me to do.
Practice, maturity, admitting we're human, and that our defenses can break. Dr. Sweeney, our Vice Chief of Emergency Medicine, has learned to deal with it. He's learned how to survive. He also knows he's vulnerable, even down here in the emergency department where there's less time to get involved. Even here, a patient or their family can get to us, sometimes when we least expect it.
I had an individual one time who was a young male who had been involved in a drug deal that went badly, and the individual was shot and then brought in, and this was a real trauma code where there are bells and whistles and, you know, IVs being slammed in and lots of hoopla in this room, to the screaming, yelling and everything. And we were unsuccessful. You know, the magic didn't work. And we were given the history that this individual had been involved in this drug deal, so the sort of defense mechanism went up and the wall went up, and you know, we lost an individual, but maybe it's not so bad because he was a drug dealer and things were bad. And we left the room, and the room was all this big bloody mess and everything. And we walked out, and I was told by the lead nurse that there was a relative out there and that it was his father. So I went out there, and here was this little man sitting in the corner of the room, which we call the bad news room, and he was a very well-dressed little man, a Hispanic gentleman. And I sat down in a very, you know, robotic way, and I said, you know, Mr. So-and-so, and was this your son? And we talked briefly for a little bit, and then I said, I have some bad news, and I said, your son is dead. And it was like a shot went through him, and at the same time it went through me. And it was just like somebody had taken me and completely thrown me out of through the wall, because I connected with him in a way that just took his soul and being and more or less destroyed it, and he in turn